what is meaningful and what is meaningless in life? It's really easy to go into a particular conversation, a particular debate, whether it's about your personal life, your professional life, your sex life, your intellectual life. It's really easy to go into a debate with the assumption that the difference between what's meaningful and what's meaningless is an objectively real distinction that's clear to all parties involved in the debate, and it's almost never true. I think even if there's no one you're debating with, if you're sitting there alone, examining your own life, looking back on what you did in the last 10 years and looking forward to what you're doing in the next 10 years, I don't think you should treat it as a settled distinction. I think you should never stop questioning, never stop doubting what's meaningful and what's meaningless in your life. And I never stopped doubting. I never stopped doubting. This is the Lao Tzu, as most people refer to the text, Dao De Jing. This is ancient Chinese philosophy. I am the last person on earth to preach to you that everyone should read this book or that this book would be meaningful or life-changing for you and you and you out in the audience. I would never do that. On the contrary, I'm really self-critical. I can remember very clearly what was meaningful to me about this book back when I was 21 years old, something like that, and how completely differently I read the book now. What was invisible to me in the text before, and what leapt forward and seemed salient and important in the text before, and what seems meaningful to me now. And in reference to both men, the man I was and the man I am now, I'm really kind of critical. I'm really doubtful. Is this meaningful? Is this meaningless? So we took a block of time, my girlfriend and I, we sat down, and we read this text together. And I mean, we sat at a table and had the book open, and I read the text to her in English out loud. And at some points, I stopped and commented on what the original Chinese meant. At some points, I stopped and told her anecdotes from the first time I studied this text with Professor Leonard Priestley, his lectures and what he drew attention to in analysis and history of the text, and other kind of extraneous anecdotes and clarifications about the ways in which Daoism is different from Buddhism and Daoism is different from Confucianism, how they all contribute to and participate in the history of Chinese intellectual thought. Some people are going to hear this and think, wow, I wish my husband sat down and did that with me. I wish my boyfriend spent quality time with me, sitting with me and reading and talking about and teaching me about, these kinds of things. And some people are going to hear this and think, wow, how completely meaningless. I'd rather watch ice hockey. I'd rather watch a football game with my boyfriend drinking beer next to me on the couch. If that's what you want, there's plenty of room on the couch. You're not going to run out of opportunities to spend your time doing that. And it would be really easy for someone like me to sit here and in a smug, judgmental way treat the distinction between what's meaningful and what's meaningless as self-evident and agreed upon. And it's not. It's not. I don't even agree with myself on it. I'm constantly challenging myself as to what's meaningful and what's meaningless. So what would make the study of this text meaningful? Well, I already mentioned one of the easy answers in terms of why you justify teaching this in a university is talking about what Daoism is in contrast to Buddhism, in contrast to Confucianism, in contrast to these other traditions within China, so that you understand the mutual distinctions and the intellectual competition between them. Another huge topic I was talking to my girlfriend about is the difference between real Daoism, Daoism as it exists in the real world, and the ideas about Daoism that European intellectuals have kind of created and propounded. And when we visited Taiwan, she got to see plenty of real-world Daoism. She got to see the religion as it exists in Taiwan today, in contrast to, some kind of dry library room, drawing room notions that were propounded and popularized in Europe. I would say especially in the period right after World War II. And another really interesting gap is the gap between languages and cultures, is the question of untranslatability, which is partly cultural and is partly linguistic. So for me, reading this now at age 40, unlike the man I was at 21, section 5, the English reads, "Heaven and earth is not sentimental." Whoa, what an under translation. It's shocking to me. It's genuinely shocking for me to read the translation that says, "Heaven and earth have no benevolence, have no run, R-E-N in pinyin. Wow. This is a shocking and iconoclastic statement. And you read the whole paragraph, or even just that sentence. This is really telling you heaven and earth, which doesn't just mean a monotheistic God, but it kind of includes, for the Chinese, a creator God and spirits, a whole animistic universe of demigods or what have you. But yeah, Tian, heaven, is also a kind of abstract concept. They don't care if you live or die. Heaven and earth have no benevolence, no compassion. They don't care, but they treat you as a disposable, sacrificial animal. Wow. And this is right at the start of the text. This is an unbelievably bleak, nihilistic, iconoclastic statement in a foundational religious text for Daoism. Now, to present that to someone with no other context in English is just, heaven and earth is not sentimental. It treats all things as straw dogs. There's no way anyone could arrive at the meaning of that passage by reading the English, and there's no way you could have a sense of the sentiment and the emotional import and the impact of that. So wow, those are also, to me, meaningful questions, right? To me, I can't sit here and say that for anyone else this is meaningful or rewarding, or how this would be useful in your lives. Now, this connects to a couple of other questions that are really ongoing and live for me right now. I mean, this is not chalkboard in my life. This relates to the question of, in what way is university education meaningful for people? The vast majority of people go to university and study things that have no real world application, that don't qualify them for a job. Political science major, so I'm now qualified to do political analysis on YouTube. Yeah. What job did that qualify me for? I have here a pathetic poster pamphlet for a university program here in Taiwan that ends by very vaguely telling you that it will facilitate students' capacity in their competitiveness in the pursuit of an individual career. And I really crossed swords with professors at University of Victoria. This is Asian Studies, this program. University of Victoria, I was in Asian Studies. Like, guys, what are we doing here? What are we studying? What are we preparing people for? Now, maybe it's this. Maybe it's, hey, we're preparing a new generation of Canadians to really have a refined knowledge of the difference between Daoism and Buddhism, the difference between Confucianism and legalism, different philosophies, this, but no, that's not what they were doing. Maybe we're preparing people, for some other career or some other life. But the role of education and what's meaningful in a purely subjective sense and in this larger institutional sense, that's something that haunts me. It's an issue I care about right now. Now, how is this text different for me at age 40 and age 21? This connects exactly to this question. It's amazing that already at this primitive stage in the history of China, long before the development of the national exam system, or the imperial exam system, or the emperor's exam system, we want to say, long before organized education in China had gotten organized, what's crystal clear in this book is that the audience he is addressing, the audience the author is writing for, is the class of scholar bureaucrat. Men who were civil servants, but it doesn't translate. There's no way to translate the sense of who these men were, their sense of themselves, their sense of their role in life. These were men who, among other things, presided over people being interrogated, being tortured, being judged, and being executed. They were pretty much judge, jury, and executioner, not quite. A little bit, I don't think they held the swords themselves. But they were responsible for life and death decisions over individual cases involving individual people. All Chinese justice at that time involved torture. You can read graphic historical accounts of that from all different angles, people who are pro-torture. The Chinese justice system involved slavery, too. People get tattooed on the face and be made into a slave as a punishment. In some ways, an unbelievably brutal role in life. And we're talking about what it means to be compassionate, what it means to be, a good word, what it means to be reasonable when you're in that role of not quite a ruler, not a king. The English here uses the word governor a lot. When you're involved in governing, when you're involved in government. And that is profoundly different from reading a Christian scripture. I mean, to whom are the Gospels addressed? Not to not to a scholar bureaucrat, right? But the assumption of this text, and again, the degree of difficulty even in reading this text and having this level of literacy in this period of time, it completely assumes it will only be read by the scholar bureaucrats of society, right? That's not the audience the Christian gospel is written for. That's not the audience the Quran in Islam is written for. And it's such a weird contrast, having now spent years and years reading Buddhist scriptures, Buddhist Suttanta, in the years in between. It stands out to me so much as a distinctive feature of the Chinese philosophy and Daoism specifically. Wow, even here, it's really all about this role of extraordinary responsibility, and yeah, erudition too, of the scholar bureaucrat. That's by and for scholar bureaucrats. And back when I was, whatever I was, 21 years old, thereabouts, when I was a university student, that did not stand out to me at all. On the contrary, I kind of scoffed and dismissed the political content of Lao Tzu. But at every stage of this book, this is a political science book. This is political philosophy from start to finish. Yeah, there's also epistemology. There are also straightforward doctrinal sentiments in there. But above all else, its political character, really stands out to me. So, as I mentioned, this book was written long, long before the creation of the system of national examinations. And this comes back to the contrast about Eastern assumptions about the university versus Western assumptions about the university. In the Western world, we made very rapid progress from the Dark Ages to the Industrial Revolution because the concept of organized education in Europe emerged, on the one hand, out of European Christian monasticism, explicitly Christian Bible colleges, whatever you want to say, monastic refectories and all the rest of it, but monastic organized education. And then on the other hand, out of European military education, and out of the sudden need to have people who could do complex mathematics and certain types of science for the army. Out of this, we created these durable institutions called universities. That's really what it arose from. And again, you can look at a specific historical example like Scotland. Scotland and the Scottish Enlightenment. The Scottish had no natural advantages over the rest of Europe, but they really took this step where they had disadvantages. And it was partly in response to those disadvantages they started building these universities. They wanted to have enough medical doctors to put on ships because they had a shipbuilding industry. So they needed a lot of medical doctors. They needed universities to standardize the use of language because it's in Scotland they were speaking a bunch of local dialects nobody else understood. There were reasons why organized education got organized in Scotland, but it was in response to disadvantages, not advantages. And it is fair to say that neither India nor China took those same steps forward in institutionalizing education. Now, the disadvantages today, all these countries in Asia have imitated and reproduced the advantages and disadvantages of European and American style education. The system of education that existed in medieval China, pre-modern China, ancient China is gone. But for so many centuries, all of Chinese society was reorganized under the impetus provided just by the government providing standardized exams. Not a system of education. If anything, this is the opposite. This is a non-systematic education. The emperor provides an exam, and then everyone else in China, parents, tutors, independent school teachers, they all have to scramble around and get organized and provide people with lessons, provide people with classrooms. They've got to sort it out for themselves how they're going to prepare people to write this exam. So everyone knows what's going to be in the exam. Everyone knows what you need to know, what you need to learn. But the role of government was not in providing an education system. It was providing the criteria by which you would be evaluated. And that exam was 100% linked to advancement in social status and standing to becoming what Lao Tzu here calls a sage, what I'm calling a scholar bureaucrat, becoming one of the men who gets to sit in judgment over who gets tortured and who gets executed. It was precisely the path to becoming a civil servant in the society that uniquely admired and valued the civil servant, and that those men were also rewarded, of course, with a relatively luxurious lifestyle and income. So that's a model of education where education is 100% linked to employment, 100% linked to social advancement. And in the West, what we've ended up with, even though we had this tremendous dynamism in Europe in emerging from the Dark Ages and progressing towards Industrial Revolution, Scottish Enlightenment, invention of the discovery of electromagnetism, the steam engine, taking technologies that already existed elsewhere like gunpowder, but then adapting them and making modern artillery out of them and so on. This is stuff that happened in Europe, and that's why Europe went on to conquer large parts of the world. For better and for worse, from my opinion, mostly for worse, of course, my biased opinion. But what happened in the West was that the institution ossified. The institution of the university became an end in itself. And today, people pay to go to universities. Families literally bankrupt themselves to put their children in universities. People live with more than $100,000 in debt to go to university, and they don't even believe in what it is they're learning. They don't believe that they're going to become more erudite people. They don't believe they're going to become people with even a higher aesthetic appreciation for life. They don't believe they're going to become people who listen to better music or have a more elevated appreciation for the theater or something. They certainly do not think they're people who are going to elevate themselves in this, partly religious, partly civic and political understanding of social hierarchy. People are signing up to go to university, I think it's no exaggeration to say, just so they can say they went to university. And look, this is in no small part the tragedy of Western civilization right now, that I really think Eastern civilization can kind of hold up a mirror for. During my childhood in Ontario, we had a conservative government that boldly declared they were going to reduce the budget. They're going to have low taxes and lower government budget by some enormous percent. They were going to have lower taxes and a smaller budget. And when they were elected, they promised they would do this without in any way reducing the money spent on education or healthcare. And I remember one of my teachers said, "Have you looked at the government budget?" I was a kid, of course. He said to the class, "What percentage of the budget for Ontario is anything other than education and healthcare?" And that was the first time I really sat and I looked at the numbers and I looked at the pie chart. I really thought about it. That wow, the awesome responsibility of government is in very large part education. That education, we don't think of it that way. Education is the work of government. The decisions about education are themselves ineluctably political. And there's no going back. I mean, they always will be. Today, China still has the culture of the national exam in terms of the way they regard university and organize high school more than university, because the exams that will get you into university, the sense of a national standardized examination that takes the measure of your soul, it's a huge thing in Chinese culture. But of course, today they have a government system of education. So I'm left looking back at this and questioning what's meaningful and what's meaningless in my own life. And as with so many things, ultimately, it's a somber set of meditations on the shortcomings of the education system that I happen to be born into. And I'm left with a sort of ashen conviction that one way or another, things have got to change. Change is objectively real. Improvement is a question of ideology. I can't tell you system is going to get better rather than worse. But my whole life, this set of assumptions that emerged in such an uncertain way from the Dark Ages and the Industrial Revolution, this set of assumptions about higher education, they've been creaking and groaning under the weight of new expectations in a new economy. And I just can't believe that the Western world is going to go on bankrupting itself to provide the next generation with a type of education that is not only worthless, but that nobody believes in, that nobody values. And I can't believe that the Eastern world, that Taiwan, where I'm living now, or Japan, that they are going to bankrupt themselves just to have the satisfaction of imitating American culture.